Hey guys, it's Katie, and I'm here today to do a review of Persuasion by Jane Austen. I figured I'll start a little bit about the background, give a brief summary, and then jump in and kind of break it down into categories similar to the ones that I have done in my previous last couple of reviews. So, this was Jane Austen's last novel and published posthumously by her brother. It is also said to be one of his most esteemed novel, and you can kind of see why. The writing is very, very different than all of the other novels that I've read. I haven't read all of them yet. But comparing it to, say, Pride and Prejudice, this is very, very, it's a lot shorter, first of all, and it's a lot more sophisticated and has a lot of complex themes in a way. And I really, really enjoyed it. So, getting into a short, brief summary about what this is about. This follows our main protagonist. Her name is Anne Elliot, and she is the second child in her family. 8 years prior to the events of this book, she was engaged to a sea captain named Captain Wentworth, and she was 19 at the time. Her mother had just died, and a close family friend of the Elliots kind of became a surrogate mother of sorts to the children, but in particular to Anne. She took a very, very big liking to Anne. And she just was not a fan of that match between her and Mr. Wentworth, so ultimately Anne called the engagement off. Then Captain Wentworth goes off to war, and now, as I said, we pick up 8 years post the events of that broken engagement. The Elliot family is, of course, as in most Jane Austen novels, it has a heavy theme of marrying for money versus marrying for love. And said it's very present in this book. Another thing that happens that also seems to be a central theme is the main protagonist's family was at one time on the more wealthier side of life, and then something happens and ultimately makes them kind of scramble around to try and marry all these people off so that they can keep their social status because some big event has caused them to slide down a bit. And that is once again the very same thing that kind of is at the core of this. So I'm going to break this down by talking about the characters, the plot, and the writing. The world building is not really relevant here because it takes place in an actual real place, just in a different period of time. And for the period of time it was written in, I thought that Jane Austen did a really good job. So first, talking about the writing. As always, Jane Austen's writing is very, very lyrical, beautiful, poetic, and very thought-provoking. It is no less this book. I really, really enjoyed going back into Jane Austen's writing because I'd forgotten how much I really actually enjoyed it. And you know, it's interesting, compared to when I last read a Jane Austen novel, I found this to be a lot easier to read than I remembered. Not that I'd read this book, but I think it just helps having a little bit more life experience and vocabulary under my belt, because what was it, junior year, Katie was just, I really enjoyed Pride and Prejudice, but I just didn't understand a ton of it at the time, how poignant and how important all of the words were and everything. But in this book, it was particularly fun for me to read because there was a lot of legal language in here pertaining to a lot of different areas and things, especially since the protagonist's father is a lawyer. And so I just found it really amusing. I mean, not that I can ever escape legal things because that's like my life, and the law makes the world tick in a lot of ways. So, I mean, I think that was just an added bonus for this book that I just was not expecting. Because they have a lot of these, like, little footnotes with, like, what words mean and things like that. And I mean, I looked at them, but 95% of the time I was like, oh, I actually know what this means. before I even looked. So, I mean, it was just extra fun. And I mean, it definitely helps having a language background, I think, and also in historical background too. So I've just grown a lot as a person since the last time I read a Jane Austen novel. And so this time my experience was just greatly enhanced, I think, by a lot of the things that I'd read. But as always, I really liked her writing style and her general writing. Next, we're going to talk about the plot. And I feel like there's not a ton to talk about in terms of the plot because on some level it doesn't feel like a ton happened, but at the same time a lot happened. So let's just launch right in. I really liked the overall flow of the story. There was a part in the middle that I felt went a little bit long. So that detracted a little bit, but absolutely everything else was great. I loved the beginning with the setting up of the family tree and the connections and just how the family got to where they were. And then ultimately to kind of finding out a little bit more about what happened between Anne and Wentworth at the time, to ultimately their meeting again and all of these crazy events surrounding their pining and jealousy with over each other and their situations and just miscommunication and insecurities of just I was living because those are literally my favorite tropes. So that's fine for me, but I could see how some people would not be as much of a fan of that. But I loved it. I loved it. And ultimately, the resolution and Wentworth coming back to Bath, it was just, I thought it was pretty well paced, as I said, except for that small section in the middle-ish that I thought was a little bit, I don't want to say unnecessary because I see how it could be necessary, but it was just a little bit drawn out too much, I think. I thought the plot, for the kind of book that it was very, very well paced and built up enough suspense and built up enough intrigue and mystery, and there was a little bit of action in there, and I was like digging that. But I really liked the plot overall. Now, third and finally is the characters. I loved Anne as a protagonist. Okay, I loved Anne so much. She was such a fun character. I saw so much of myself in her. Her knowledge of things, her people skills, just her overall introspectiveness, and I don't know, I just have a very similar personality to her, I think. So I really liked her, and I loved Wentworth. I wish we got to see more of him and more of his side. Hey, someone should do a retelling of this story from Wentworth's side. I would love to see that. I'm not even joking. I have a feeling I would really enjoy reading that, especially as a naval captain. Like, him being angry and just pining on a boat for a long time and then coming back and pining more and being jealous and being super insecure and just trying to like deal with his feelings in his life. Just excuse me, let me just scream about how much I would read that. Please give it to me. I mean, those are the main two characters that I really cared about. I really disliked Anne's family. Like, her father was a narcissistic moron, and for an attorney, I was just screaming inside in frustration because he was just, oh my god, I really was not a fan. And her older sister, also not a fan because she was just basically the female form of her father. Younger sister was the typical annoying, frivolous, whiny person that I just didn't care for. Most of the other men were annoying. There were one or two other men that were intriguing enough that I was like, oh, this is actually a really interesting interaction. Or, oh, that's an interesting point, or something like that. But I hated, and I mean hated, Mr. Elliot with, good reason. He was frustrating and annoying, and I was just like, excuse me? But that's, you know, chill. But a lot of the other women I was also not a fan of because they're very catty and very gossipy and just super nosy. And I'm just like, you need to chill, okay? But I loved Mrs. Smith. She was so fun and such an interesting character. I mean, she's more than meets the eye because as we find out later in the book, you think she's just like, oh, she's just a friend of Anne's that Anne goes to visit from time to time. But oh no, she's like the knowledge hub about all the things. And I'm like, I also relate to that because that's also me. There were very few characters that I liked, but I found all of the interactions, regardless of whether I liked someone or not, to be enlightening, interesting, important, or they brought something to the story, regardless of whether I liked their character or not. So overall, I really enjoyed this book. As I said, my tropes are just heavily, heavily featured in this, and the writing was beautiful. Some of the characters I really, really enjoyed. Most of them I just didn't. But another thing is, let's talk about the ending for a second, because I was screaming over the ending. I didn't really cry, but like I was just feeling it. I died over the letter, and then their conversations at the end, it was just beautiful. Well done. As always, Jane Austen's resolutions are lovely, and I really, really enjoyed it. But yeah, overall, really enjoyed it. Would recommend. Definitely, definitely read this. But yeah, I think that's about all I've got. You know the drill. Like, comment, subscribe. Social media is below. And other social media on request if you'd like. And I will come back with another video for you guys again soon. Okay, bye.